Good evening. I'm going to call the October the 25th, 2021 City Council study session to order. And at this point, I'm going to turn over to our administrator, Mr. Jim Clifford.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have 3 items for our study session this evening. Item 1 is the review of the agenda for the City Council meeting next Monday. 2 is the Department of Details. And 3rd, under Mayor's Matters, we're going to have a focus area for Tom Zeeser to talk about speed bumps and control measures in neighborhoods. I know that's been a topic recently with some of our citizens as far as requests go. So we'll be able to talk a little bit about that. So first, if I may, I'll go to our first item, which is the agenda. And I'll skip right to number 5 under Finance. And actually, all of our items currently on the agenda for next week are all finance-related items. So the first item is ordinance number 2021-17, adopting a budget for fiscal year 2022, containing estimates of proposed revenues and expenditures by the City of North Augusta, South Carolina for the budget year beginning January 1st, 2022, and declaring that same shall constitute the budget of the City of North Augusta for such budget year. So we had a first reading of this ordinance last week and had very few comments. We had one from, I believe, Mr. Macon came over here at City Council meeting and made an initial comment during the budget public period. And we intend to, again, present for next week. No change from the staff on that item. And I'll move then into item number 2, under item 6, I should say, ordinance number 2021-18, which is levying the annual tax on property in the City of North Augusta. Again, these are linked items. The tax rate, the millage rate here with the budget, those are hand-in-glove items. And then the last under unfinished business, item number 7, is ordinance number 2021-19, which is amending Article 4, Section 14-123, titled Sanitation Services Fees of the City Code of the City of North Augusta, South Carolina, also a second reading. So again, that sets sanitation rates for the city. There's a modest fee increase for residents and also for commercial vendors here in the city, and we've not had a fee increase in quite some time. So this will allow us to operate, again, in a revenue neutral kind of way, and not to hoard money, if you will. And so I'll take a quick pause for those items. Those are all the items under unfinished business. Again, those are all second reading items for next City Council meeting, as we've already done the first reading last week. Hearing no questions, I'll move to item number 8 under new business, which is ordinance number 2021-20, which is an ordinance to adopt a revised business license ordinance in accordance with the Business License Standardization Act, the 2000 Act number 176. This will be a first reading. Cammie Hayes is certainly prepared to talk to you, in depth about the material that you've been presented, which is here. And so ultimately this keeps us in line with the state of South Carolina's business license ordinance requirements. So Cam, is there anything you wanted to add for just the amendments we've made here?
Just a few things I'd point out to you. This is the final step in our process for standardizing business licenses. This ordinance was prepared by the Municipal Association, so the language will be standard across cities and towns in South Carolina. There are a few minor tweaks to the language that we were able to make, but we relatively kept it standard with what the Municipal Association provided. One thing to point out, when we previously had talked about where our rates would be set, the revenue neutral was around 2%, was what was considered revenue neutral, and the Municipal Association has taken the stance of a 1% at this time. And so what that has done is our rate classes 1 through 7, we've reduced the base rate by $5 and also reduced the price per thousand by 10 cents. So that is a benefit to our city businesses. Also in this ordinance under rate 9, you will see that's a new addition for the city. What we looked at, it's called special event promoters. And so if someone in the city wants to host an event that has multiple vendors, that promoter can come obtain a license for the event versus having to license each individual vendor, which is the current practice that we have to follow under our adopted ordinance.
Cammie, would that also account for, I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor.
That's on page A4.
So would that also account for something where we were doing like a downtown event and we had an umbrella organization like the Merchant Association or North Augusta Ford, and if they had a number of vendors working for them, that they would have one license that would cover all subordinate entities as opposed to each one of them going to get a license, which is what we're dealing with right now as we go through Fall Fest. So this allows us to have an easier way of being able to host larger events here in the city, especially with partner organizations.
We looked at, there was another city, the reason this ordinance was slightly delayed in getting to you, there was another city that had been through the language with this with their city attorney and also had worked with the municipal association, so we waited until they published their adopted language. Their city council actually heard it last week, so we have mimicked their language but adjusted the rates to try and make sense in our community. And that's really all I have unless you have any questions.
We were talking early on last year about this with representatives of the municipal association, and what we decided to do with your leadership was to adopt the municipal association's rate structure for beginning 2022.
Well, so we started in 21. We made a lot of the recommended changes. So it's about a 6-step process. Our license year previously was not with the recommended license year, so we've modified that previously. Also, the classification of each business is determined by an IRS classification schedule that's published. And we had some businesses that were not in appropriate classes, and we cleaned all of that up previously. So we had updated a lot of the steps in 2021, but we still have this piece, which is our final piece for 2022 to be in compliance with the act.
Well, good. Thank you. It looks very good. Thank you.
Thanks, Cam. Any questions from further questions from the council? Hearing none, we're going to close out item 1, which is city council meeting, and move into item 2, which is the department details. And I will call Cammie back up to the stage where she can talk through the department details for the finance department.
So as far as taxes go, our tax sale notice number 1, we're required to publish 3 of them leading up to the tax sale. It ran in Saturday's paper along with Aiken County and City of Aiken. If anyone likes that, they can request it. We can also make it available on the website if necessary. We currently have about 24 properties on the list, but there's still time to pay prior to going to the sale. I did notice, looking at our list as well as City of Aiken, Aiken County, and the lists are a little bit lower compared to prior years. So that's something that COVID did not have an impact on, was folks paying their property taxes. The tax sale is going to be held on November 8th at the Aiken Convocation Center, and our tax clerk and myself will represent us for that sale. As far as utilities go, next week we have a disconnect cycle on the 3rd and 4th, as well as a due date on the 4th. And as Jim already mentioned, related to the budget, we'll have second reading coming up at your next council meeting, and that will be for the 3 ordinances he mentioned, and then the business license ordinance will have first reading on Monday, and then 2 weeks following that will be the final ordinance related to the budget adoption for 22. And that's all I have.
Cammie, also, if you would just stay there for a moment for the council's benefit, I'd like to announce that Cammie was named as the president of the Municipal Finance Officers, Clerks, and Treasurers Association here in South Carolina. So a big honor and a nice feather in the cap for North Augusta to have one of our department heads in a leadership position here across the state. So, Cammie, congratulations.
Congratulations.
Could also announce that the MFOCTA and BLOA Joint Academy will be held in North Augusta in fall of 22. So that would be a great addition. They've never been here before. We've had some other conferences. We're typically in Greenville, Hilton Head area, but I'd brought up North Augusta in the stadium and the river aspects. And so everyone from across the state will be coming here. So that'll be nice.
Awesome. Thank you. Good stuff.
All right, next up we'll have Public Services with James Hutton.
Starting next Monday, November the 1st, we've got property maintenance staff scheduled to go to Georgia Avenue at the Public Safety's headquarters property and start doing some underbrush clearing and hauling off some various debris from the site. We anticipate it'll take about 7-8 days to complete the task. Any questions or?
I would only ask what was the extent of what they've done so far that happened over there?
Councilman, I can cover that if you need me to.
Sure.
So we've had, obviously, a site survey. I was able to walk the ground with some of James's leadership, along with public safety, and also with our construction crews from Capstone and also designers from JLA. And so I've recently sent an update to the council. You probably just have it in your inbox, or about half hour ago, about the public safety headquarters. But ultimately, when we walked the ground, we determined there was still some Dominion Energy light or poles inside the property lines, and so we called Dominion. They've now since removed the items that are on that property, so the wiring and the cabling that went out to the poles, along with the poles themselves. They also did some clearing operations near Observatory Avenue. That was done with Dominion crews, not with city crews. We are in the process right now of contracting for an asbestos survey for the old motel, and waiting to see what the results of that are, to have that abated. The intention is that James's crew, once we have an asbestos survey done and any abatement done if necessary, that the city crews will take apart those items. And Roy and his team within property maintenance, starting next week, are going to remove a lot of the underbrush and the unimportant smaller trees. Roy's got a great tree inventory at that site, and so we're not looking to remove any of the larger elder trees that can be saved, but there's a lot of junk that's on that site that we're going to take some time to go through. And so it may be as short as 2 weeks, but it could potentially go longer. And our intention is to make sure that Historic North Augusta as well is notified on some of the timings of this, so that as we work in and around the buildings, that they have some visibility of what's going on around there. But we're not going to be removing any of the historic trees or the trees that are in good shape. And Roy's done a pretty good job of already surveying what's already on that property. So hopefully that answered your question.
Thank you. Moving on, we're going to be also, utilities this week will be working near the intersection of Woomrath Road and Sycamore Drive. They're going to be installing new service lines to serve 5 residential buildings that are being constructed. And it should take 4 or 5 days to complete that task. The wastewater service is going to be provided by a line extension. It's going to be a force main, and engineering is currently in the process of designing that pipe system, so we can do some metal with DHEC to get a construction permit. Any questions, sir?
Thank you, James.
Thanks, James. Appreciate it. Next up, we'll have planning and development with Tommy Paradise.
This coming Thursday, the agendas for BZA go out. And while I'm talking about BZA, both the Board of Zoning Appeals and the Planning Commission are looking at changing the day of the week that they meet. I'll know something better after they meet and they decide on that. And on Friday, if y'all are like me, I've been wondering what was going on with the traffic calming study for George Avenue. Finally got connected to the right person in Columbia, and basically verified that we've submitted everything from our end that we needed, and we need to wait on them to give us authorization before we can put out the request for proposals. So the ball's in their court.
They give you any time frame for that?
No, sir. A couple of weeks ago they told me it'd be a couple of weeks. So I give you the answer that I got.
Okay.
Thanks, Tommy. Next, we'll go over to public safety with Chief Thomas.
As I'm talking about, Kalia is here virtually, and that's the reaccreditation process that we're currently doing. That started today. It'll run through Wednesday. I think some of you were contacted. David, thank you, and Mayor Williams and Mr. Clifford for participating in that process today. So we've got 2 more full days of that. Also, we'll be involved with North Augusta Forward's Fall Festival. I think that's Saturday from 10 to 5, as you see. We'll be providing security, obviously, as well as some traffic. And one item I got today, and I'll share with you, Saturday we did a DEA drug take back along with Parks Pharmacy, and we collected 138 pounds of prescription drugs on Saturday. So we do these in conjunction with DEA, and we just got those numbers today, but the next one I think is in April.
Chief, will you just, 'cause I was gonna mention this since you're here, tell about what you had a virtual today, and tomorrow you've got a public safety community event. Can you kind of just tell about that?
Sure.
In case folks who are watching may want to show up.
Sure. We've invited everybody through social media and our media outlets, but there's a public information session tomorrow from 5 to 6 here in the council chambers. All the citizens are welcome to come out and talk about public safety or have any questions or any concerns, good, bad, or indifferent, and we'll welcome those people tomorrow afternoon, sir. Thank you.
Thanks, Chief. Next, we got Parks, Rec, and Tourism with Rick Meyer.
I'll just hold it. North Augusta PRT maintenance staff, believe it or not, will begin installation of Christmas decorations in the city beginning next week. The annual Christmas tree lighting event at Calhoun Park is scheduled for Tuesday, November 30th, 5 p.m. to 6:30 p.m., with Mayor Williams lighting the Christmas tree. PRT maintenance staff is installing 10 new Hometown Hero banners this week that we received. The Hometown Hero banners will stay up through Veterans Day on November the 11th. The following week, obviously, the banners will be replaced with Christmas banners. Any questions?
Thank you, Rick.
Thanks, Rick. Next, we'll go to Tom Zeser with Engineering and Public Works.
I just wanted to provide an update to the Observatory Road closure that I believe administration has sent out notice to you all, and it's been advertised on the city's Facebook page last week. But there was a coordination meeting with DOT this morning, and again, the road closure is proposed to be done to make the utility tap connections for the public safety fire station. And the original DOT permit did not anticipate a road closure, a complete road closure, but due to the proximity to the Martintown Road intersection, it was determined that the safest way to perform that work was to do a full closure. So it will create some additional inconvenience to motorists, and to some local residents. But again, there will be a hard closure at the Martintown Observatory Road intersection at the Georgia Avenue end. It will be closed to through traffic only, so local traffic residents will all have access to their homes and should not be impeded. They just won't be able to go out the Martintown Road end while that work is underway. But again, that work is scheduled to begin on this Wednesday at 8 a.m. The road will be fully reopened by 4 p.m. that day. Hopefully all underground work will be completed on Wednesday. And then the road will be temporarily plated, and the contractor plans to come back next week to do the patchwork and fully restore the road. Any questions?
Thanks, Tom. JD is not here this evening, but I will just highlight we have a few positions that are open for fill. So anybody watching at home, we're still in the market for public safety dispatchers listed as communications technicians, for firefighters, for a public safety officer. We got folks still in need at the engineering and public works for building standards for part-time permit clerk, and also for James Sutton's crew for vehicle operator sanitation. And lastly, we're still looking for trolley drivers, part-time trolley drivers with a CDL to come out and help out, because I think we've got 2 qualified people right now. We're certainly looking for more folks to go do that based on the uptake of trolley usage we have here in the city. So with that, I will close out our department details from item number 2. And subject to any of your questions, I'll move to item number 3.
All I've got under mayor's matters is just that, just remind everybody that next Monday we'll have our first public power hour of the month. That'll be at 5 o'clock. So, and I meant to ask Chief, looked like from what I saw on social media, y'all had a great turnout at the trunk or treat at Riverview Park on the 16th. Looked like it was very well done, and thank you for that, sir.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
That's all I got.
So before I turn it over to Tom Ziesser to talk about neighborhood traffic calming, also known as speed bumps, we'll have, hopefully by next week for a city council meeting, our issue with the projector resolved. We believe the equipment will be coming in this week. We've had some supply chain issues, as many of you have been aware of, on a number of different projects, but that's been the holdup for us to be able to put visual information up on the screen for everybody here in the council chamber. So that's why Tom's going to be doing those off old school PowerPoint handouts, although our folks that are watching this via streaming should be able to see this on Facebook, because these slides will be presented for the folks at home. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Tom and have a discussion about just traffic calming in general and what that means for the city and what those options look like.
So I'm going to talk a little more broadly, when I talk about traffic calming more than just speed bumps, but this is not a new issue for us in North Augusta or anywhere really. In fact, this presentation is excerpted from one it's excerpted from one I made to City Council in 2008 in an attempt to deal with some of the frequent complaints that we receive, both myself and public safety, for complaints regarding speeding in neighborhoods. So again, traffic calming, on slide 2, I'll try to paraphrase the definition, but it's basically incorporating various features into the roadway to affect driver behavior, mainly to slow them down, to improve the conditions for the non-vehicular users of the roadway, pedestrians, bicyclists, etc. Slide 3. So the goals of traffic calming are again to incorporate the desires of the local residents, usually, of what they'd like to have on their streets, to create a safe and attractive streets, and also to increase the quality of life for the residents that live on those streets. And so again, the objectives are to, well, slow speeds, but it's to achieve appropriate speeds for the particular roads that you're looking at, to increase the safety for the non-motorized users. Again, reducing the need for public safety. It's very easy for me when I get complaints about speeding on streets to say, I'm Public Works, that's a public safety issue, call them. But I understand that, they have limited resources just like I do, so ideally the goal is to incorporate elements that achieve the reduced speeds without having to have police officers out there with radar guns and measures. And then also another goal is to in some cases, to reduce the cut-through type traffic, the traffic that is not using those streets, is only using those streets to get to another, to cut a corner somewhere. Again, we talked about Observatory Avenue a minute ago. That's a great example of a cut-through street that we have in North Augusta. So the three measures that I'm really going to talk about for traffic calming are reduced speed limits. One that we also get a lot of requests for is to incorporate all-way stops at four-legged intersections in neighborhoods as a way to reduce speeds. And then again, speed humps or tables. So starting with the reduced speed limits, our city code requires or has a 30 mile-per-hour speed limit citywide unless otherwise posted. You know, we may consider in residential neighborhoods, maybe a 25-mile-per-hour speed limit might be more appropriate for those neighborhoods. That's probably our number one request, is to get speed limits reduced to 25 miles per hour, and we normally are agreeable to those changes. So maybe a consideration is to make that in a form of an ordinance somehow, so that it's not something that we have to go back later and retrofit and put up new signs and throughout neighborhoods. So that's just something to consider.
Tom, I might be jumping ahead of you on this. Is that regardless of whether we own the road or not? So we can control that if it's, or we're talking about non-DOT roads?
Yeah, primarily. I'm talking,
Okay.
yes. The DOT will consider and will, to reduce speed limits down to 25. That's as low as they will post speed limits on state-owned roads. Okay, all-way stops, intersections, again, that's one I frequently get requests for, where we have a four-way intersection where it's stop controlled one direction. Residents will often request to make that a four-way stop solely for the purpose of reducing speeds through the neighborhood. And I'll just, that's generally not the purpose of a four-way stop. They're generally not creating a four-way stop solely for reducing speed is generally not a accepted practice. Usually the only time you want to make an intersection a four-way stop is when there's a specific safety issue, such as you just have too much traffic and one direction just can't go, or you have sight distance issues where you can't see oncoming traffic. So there's cases where it is appropriate to make intersection a four-way stop, but it's just shown that making an intersection a four-way stop solely to reduce speed limit is just not effective. It's just it may, obviously people will have to slow down to get to stop, but they often will speed up to make up that lost time. And you have the same issue with speed humps actually, but not quite as there's ways to work to control that. So our policy has been that generally that is and it's consistent with the DOT, is that we do not approve four-way stops just for speed control. So I'm going to sort of skip through to slide 11 and get right into the speed humps discussion, because that's, I think, mostly what we get requests for. And so again, when I talk about speed humps, we're not talking about, there's a difference between a speed hump and a speed bump. Speed bump is the things you see in a North Augusta Plaza, places like that, where they're very abrupt, usually very high. They're effective, but they're jarring, and that's not what we're proposing or even suggesting be considered for residential streets. So a speed hump it's a more rounded, they call it parabolic shaped vertical asphalt patch, and usually only 3 to 4 inches high, and I have some pictures of various examples of them in the presentation of what they look like, and I'm sure you've seen these around other neighborhoods. And then speed tables are very similar. They're raised similar height, but they have a wider flat section on top, and basically that allows the whole vehicle to span across the table. And so They're not quite as effective in reducing speeds, but these are similar to what we have on our greenway crossings, where the main intent is it's mostly to just alert the drivers that something is there, a pedestrian crossing is there. And you see these on, I got some pictures on slides 16 of a speed table that's at the greenway crossing at Pinion Road. And then on slide 17, that's the speed table on Broxton Drive in the village at Bergen Place. And so again, they're effective in just alerting drivers that there's a pedestrian crossing there. And there's actually modular type of these that are available. It's shown on slide 18 that you can get, for instance, if you wanted to do a demonstration project somewhere, try it out, and it may not be, before you actually put a permanent one there, just to gauge how effective it might be at that location or residential response to it.
Do people ever put the humps to where they're portable like this, ongoing, or they don't do that? This example you showed right here.
Oh, I don't know if that's, a permanent installation. I'm just showing that there are modular type ones you can obtain that can be, placed and removed or moved to a different location. Sure. All right, so moving on to slide 19. So talking about the advantages and disadvantages of these. Again, the advantages of speed humps are they are effective in slowing travel speeds. That's often determined by the height and how frequently you put them. It's not very effective just to plop a speed hump, on a street somewhere. Depending on the length of the road, you often have to put these in sequence for them to be really effective. And they will often reduce traffic volumes, as people who don't want to drive over those devices will seek alternative routes in some cases. They're relatively inexpensive. That they're getting more expensive by the week this year, but just with the price of materials going up. But generally, they're reasonable, and they don't interfere with bicycles. Bicyclists can generally ride them without any trouble. And again, one of the main goals is they do reduce the need for your law enforcement. The disadvantages, obviously they can cause discomfort for some drivers and vehicles. They can create noise at the speed as vehicles ride over them. They can make noise, which can be, very aggravating to the local residents. Some people don't like the way they look. They can delay emergency response vehicles. That's probably one of the biggest arguments against them that I've heard. Basically because they're doing what they're designed to do, to slow down vehicles, so they can, obviously emergency vehicles will have to slow down to navigate them as well. From public works perspective, they do require additional maintenance to keep them up. You have not only to install them, but as you do other road maintenance, such as resurfacings, you often will have to remove them and replace them, which can increase cost. You have signage and pavement markings that have to go along with them, if you're going to do them properly. So the signage and the markings generally don't last as long as the speed hump does, so they have to be updated and replaced. And even though they're relatively inexpensive, they can be difficult to construct properly. I think David McGee might attest to, but you have to, it's not something that, you need experienced contractors to do them. It's not something that just any any guy with a truckload of asphalt can do properly. And then I just have various pictures of signage, very creative signage for these, how they're dealt with other places.
Tom, on some of the state roads, when you're approaching a stop sign, they have something like a rumble strip
Right.
that's maybe 75 feet before you get to that sign, and then it's another rumble strip as you approach it. Have you thought of anything like that? As opposed to the tables? Would that work
Oh,
or
you're
not?
talking about not necessarily on an approach to a stop sign, but just random rumble strips?
Yes.
I guess that's possible. I've not really considered
Just-
them for traffic calming. The
Yeah.
main purpose of those is to wake up the driver and let him know that he's getting ready to
That's
approach
true.
something.
That's true.
They make a lot of noise. I can't imagine putting them in a typical residential street. I feel like that would not, they would not be accepted well.
Sure.
It's my
Chief, if you wouldn't mind, would you kind of lend your perspective on kind of the Department of Public Safety's view on kind of the traffic calming items that we're talking about?
Sure. One of the things I think from a public safety perspective is obviously the vehicles that have to reach those areas quickly. And when I talk about that, I'm not just talking about police vehicles. I'm talking about ambulances. And ambulances, as you know, has a lot of equipment in them. And if you've ever been inside an ambulance, you'll see they're attached to different walls of the ambulance and they're hanging overhead. So there's always that possibility of, especially in an ambulance, to lose some of that equipment, break some of that equipment that obviously is needed, in response to someone needing an ambulance. The other part of that for us would be those fire trucks, and those fire trucks have to be there in a hurry. We're talking about precious time to save, a life and a structure. So, again, I caution you because, a fire apparatus has a lot of equipment on it, a lot of expensive equipment on it too. So, if we go into a full-blown house fire, our need is to get there quickly, but we also have volunteers as well. So, that's another consideration we need to take into account when we talk about responding and having to navigate some of those common devices. So, it's a different story for us to try to navigate some of those things because of the equipment and the time we need to respond in.
And then I think Kelly had a legal opinion on this as well.
Well, this is something that has come up periodically for a lot of years. It used to be a lot easier to respond to it because the simple kind of answer was you just can't do it. Because at one time the highway department, they just would not allow them, and it has to do with liability. That's not the situation now, because obviously if DOT has put together specifications for placing them and under certain specifics, then we certainly can do it. The liability issue is still there. I think earlier today when we were talking about it, said that it's pretty simple. If you don't have the speed hump there, the city has no liability. If you do have the speed hump there, if something happens, probably the city is going to see their name on a complaint, whether we've got any responsibility or not. And that can be whether somebody wrecks with a motorcycle, whether there's a car there, whatever may happen. And the other thing that I see probably that would be of most concern is, as I say, there are very specific specifications, and we obviously would have to make sure we build them to those specifications, but then I think we're going to have a responsibility to maintain them in that same manner. And we put one in, everything looks fine, and 4 or 5 years later, there's a wreck there. The plaintiff's attorneys, engineers come and check everything, and they can testify that it is not to specifications, then you have an issue. So I think if you do them, just realizing liability, you need to not just consider the cost of installing them, but the cost of very closely monitoring them and maintaining them, so you can, anything happens, that they're the specifications that the highway department has established, that we've built them in that manner.
Yeah, I've got, as I, having the presentation, number of pictures of the various signs that people use. Well, folks seem to think that speed hump signs are kind of funny and like to collect those, so hang in their houses. But so yeah, right. So if a sign is missing and we're not aware of that, and there is an accident or something happens, then that's exactly what Mr. Zier's referring to.
I know on the Greenway, the one at Pinion and the one at Broxton work very well. They're good looking, they're designed properly and installed properly. So if we were to do that, that's the type that I would recommend.
Absolutely.
I guess I'll be the negative Nancy here. I've driven in Columbia County neighborhoods. Jim, I know your neighborhood has them. I'm not a fan, mainly for the emergency vehicles. And what I have found is people will speed in between them. I mean, they'll get over it and they'll still, break the speed limit to get to the next one, slam on brakes. I mean, at the end of the day, no matter what we do, reducing speed limits, putting up speed humps, it's not going to stop somebody who wants to speed. And I know y'all get complaints, Chief, Tom. I know y'all get them, but at the end of the day, you got to catch them in the act, unfortunately, no matter if we have speed humps, no matter if we've got, reduced speed limits in the neighborhoods. And I'm curious of all the complaints y'all get, if it's from the same people all the time, and do we know that the people they're complaining about are actually speeding? Could it just be, well, it looked fast to me, even though they may be doing the speed limit?
So, Councilman, also to kind of weigh into this, I would tell you that, this has been in the news locally, both with Richmond County and with Columbia County on the Georgia side, about how they're handling this. And one of the interesting byproducts of this discussion is, I think in Augusta, if I have this properly annotated, is that they had a neighborhood that asked for speed bumps. They put the speed bumps in, and then a different set of residents wanted them out, so later on they pulled them out, and then later on they had to put them back in again. So they also deal with cost associated with taking these in and putting them out, and also what rules are you going to put in place just because you have maybe 2 residents on a street that say they want speed bumps or some kind of table device, but then the other residents do not. So that what's the threshold then for municipality or for a county to say that, hey, is it 51%? Is it 90%? What's the magic number to incentivize the council from a citizen perspective to actually put that device in? And likewise, what's the threshold to take them out? So I think with Columbia County, at least what I read recently, was they have to have 100% of the people, once the device goes in, that they need 100% for it to come out. And then, oh, by the way, they're taking some of the cost associated with those devices and spreading them across the neighborhood, so that there is actual a fee increase for those homes to be able to put that device in their neighborhood. And we have a limited amount of C-Fund funding available that has to do with our roads and road improvement. And so for every dollar we would potentially put into a new speed device is a dollar that we don't have to put into repaving or other C-Fund requirements. So it's a zero-sum game as far as the kind of infrastructure money that we have to deal with. So if we have an overriding safety concern to put a speed table or speed hump in, hey, that's fine, but that's going to come at the cost of something else in that budget line.
Right. And Chief, can you speak to, have you had any, as, I guess, fatal incidents where neighborhood speeding where speed humps could have stopped something? I mean, is there any data out there for that kind of stuff?
Not that I'm aware of, Eric. I mean, you know, we try to answer complaints as we get them. Obviously, and the point you make, you know, I can be standing in my front yard, cutting grass, and the car comes past me, and you would think he's driving 50 miles an hour, when in reality he's probably doing the speed limit. It just looks a lot faster than it actually is. So, you know, again, public safety writes a lot of traffic citations, and you know, we slow people down. I think we have that reputation, you know, and I'm not going to apologize for writing traffic citations because that's a deterrent, and it also saves lives. So again, I think we have to look at, you know, this whole thing here. That's something we try to stay on top of, and we answer that call daily, you know, when it comes to traffic enforcement.
And you're right about the reputation. I mean, Kevin, you grew up here like me. We never sped, and it's ingrained to me till this day. You know, anytime I'm, you know, on the interstate, people run a little bit fast, but anytime I come into a little town, I always slow down, just because, you know, our officers were pretty tough on us as kids, and no, that reputation is there. I do think presence probably makes a bigger deterrent more than anything. I know. I think it was one of the third Thursdays or something not too long ago. I come across the bridge, and it was amazing. Nobody was speeding over 13th Street because there was a patrol car just parked right up there with its lights on, and I don't even think there was an officer in there. But I'm telling you, I mean, you come across that bridge, people run 45 miles an hour and slam on the brakes right out here. And but I think, you know, presence is the biggest deterrent. And
Councilman, we had a bumper crop of tickets at the third Thursday on Georgia Avenue, and I think I don't want to say they broke a record, but they had a good haul on Thursday.
I think we issued 46 citations, 8 warnings, and a DUI. So,
right here on the bridge. Yeah, I mean,
on third Thursday.
Yeah, downtown I witnessed several pullovers.
Let's get it to 100.
But I think that's really, at the end of the day, that's going to be the only thing that deters people from speeding. I don't think the amount of speed humps you put in. I mean, lowering the speed limits, I'm okay with that. If you want to do 25, you know, I live in Hammond Hills, so if you want to make it 25, that's fine. But people that already speed through there are going to speed through it no matter what. But I just, you know, having worked all over the area, I hate going to any neighborhoods in Columbia County. You know, my wife's father lives out off of Hardy McManus Road, and my goodness, you got to go through 10 of those things, and I mean, they're not just a little. I mean, you got to almost come to a stop. So I'm just not a huge fan of them, and I really don't think it's going to deter speeding personally.
Are you going to end now, or do you have other stuff you're going to talk about?
No, I'm really at the end. I did provide a separate, if it is determined to go forward with a program, I did provide a manual for your information.
Well, let me just say, it'll be interesting, David and Jennifer and old Pat, if y'all saw this, but Eric, I would tell you the number one thing when I went door knocking during the campaign, and I got 4 different neighborhoods. I can't recall the neighborhoods right now, but I'll give them to you. I asked, what can we do better? And the issue I got repeatedly was, my street is a cut through and it is a problem. I'd be open to speed bumps. So, I don't know, David, you got it all? I don't know how much door knocking you did, or Jen.
I got some.
But I'm telling you, it is an issue. So I'm glad we're looking at this, and I've got some other thoughts about something, but I would say I'm glad we're looking at it. I think it is an issue.
I had a quick question. If we looked into something like this, is there a way to determine if the street actually is viable for the hump instead of the citizen just claiming that they want one? Is there like a program to analyze the street flow and everything, and so that you don't have, I know I live on East Avenue, and I think I'm a cut-through street, and we've had neighbors talk about getting speed humps for years, but that's just us saying it. I would wonder if there was an actually study to analyze it and then determine if it's appropriate or not versus just opinion-based, I guess.
That's right. Again, the draft program that you've been provided sort of lays out the process if we were to go forward with this, and there would be a great deal of analysis to be done on our side to determine what streets are even eligible for these devices. And then once we have a request, there's more steps that have to be taken where it requires some monitoring of the traffic, the speed limits, what people are actually driving on that street to determine if they are if it's truly they truly have excessive speeding. And so yes, again, that manual.
Tom, would we have to contract out for some of the traffic monitoring and all that? I mean, that's a lot of, I know there's a lot of detailed work that goes into it, and you got a pretty small department. So is that an in-house or is that a contracted function?
Depending on the volume of requests, yes, it could require contractual work. I mean, public safety has a speed trailer, but their trailer to be honest, it's out there on the side of the road and it shows your speed limit. So it sort of causes, while you're doing that study, it causes drivers they see that and they're not driving like they normally would be. And so yes, it might require some additional equipment or possibly contractual services to do that study.
Would it be possible to rotate the radar machine in neighborhoods where you have complaints of speeding?
I think they do that upon request.
We do, Mr. Brooks. I mean, what Tom is describing is a big box, and you've seen it. It flashes and it gives you the reading. Problem with that, you can't miss it, and the newer ones, and the one we have is a little dated. You kind of put it on a pole, and it's a box, so you never see it. So it analyzes the data, and you can get that data and decide and decipher through that. Is it a problem, or is it just maybe a neighbor who's seeing something that they don't actually see, if that makes sense? So yeah, we can do that, and we do that. Put it in neighborhoods. But again, if a person sees that, he's going to slow down for sure. We don't get a true reading, if that makes sense.
Okay, thank you.
Another device that was, I don't even know if they were really readily available when I originally did this, you may have seen them where it's a speed limit sign, but then it has a digital board underneath it where it actually it says your speed kind of thing. It's similar to that, but that's all it does is solely to alert drivers to make them aware of just how fast they are driving. It could be another implemented device.
Yeah, I think the studies. Okay. So it's not anything we're voting on. We're just having a study session. I like for us to consider. This is really good. I had a chance to get a sneak peek before the rest of y'all today, so I kind of went through this part of it, and it's really good. And I appreciate everything you've done so far. But I would like us maybe reach out and I don't think we probably have, if we did in 2008, is Greenville, South Carolina has made traffic calming something that is very positive there. And I think it would be good if we could reach out and find out the liability issue. Have they run into anything? 'Cause I think you bring a good point. And I think it'd be really interesting, Chief, to find out on their end, with the public safety, what are the issues they've run across, good or bad? Because I've talked to Mayor Knox White about this. They have a website you can go to. And your program here hits a number of the points they have, but there's about 3 or 4 things that if we were going to move in this direction, I think we ought to consider. So, I would just be open to having you do a little bit more, maybe reaching out to Greenville and see their thoughts so we can have some clarity on some of the concerns we've shown. So we can gather the data to really make sure this is something we want to proceed forward. We may not, that's fine, but I just like to cover all our bases. That'd be okay. Y'all okay with that? Okay.
Mr. Mayor, just to encapsulate what I think I heard, is that you would like city staff to include the city attorney to reach out to the city of Greenville to find out about liability issues or concerns that they have with their program, and also on the public safety side to see how that's working for them from a traffic calming perspective, and have those kind of that report back to the council.
as well as are there parts, because there's about 3 or 4 pieces in their program that follows close to what you've done, but they've added, there's an education component, there's a component like, for example, I don't think council ought to be the ones to vote on this. They actually let the neighborhoods themselves, and the neighborhoods don't step up and vote. So I'm saying there's some components I think I'd like to have you reach out and just, so give us some options. If we're gonna talk about this further, we can just kinda have all our ducks in a row. That's all.
I would just ask that if you can also have a cost for those speed signs that have the little ticker on them.
I kind of,
Yeah.
I'd like to see what that might be.
That's good work, Tom. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I just thought about something when you said when you were campaigning and people said, I live on a cut-through road. If you live in North Augusta, every road's a cut-through road.
Well, there are a
I
couple
mean, to an
locations.
extent, you know what, because, I mean, you can go down here to Hammond's Ferry, and you can drive all the way up to Tractor Supply without ever getting on a main road. So, you know, that's the beauty of North Augusta that I do like, is you don't have to get on the main roads, whereas Columbia County, a lot of those, you know, I was talking about where my father-in-law lives, every one of those neighborhoods down Hardy McManus Road, all 10 or 12 of them, hardly any of them interconnect. I mean, they're all dead end, and you got to come back out. I think if we start cutting off roads, it creates more volume of traffic somewhere else. But, you know, that's kind of my thinking on North Augusta is all the neighborhoods interconnect for the most part with few exceptions. So, there's people that live on my street, which is off of Woodlawn, and they say, well, this is a cut through for people trying to beat school traffic. You know, to me, it's not, but, so, yeah, I agree people speed. Those speed humps are, in my opinion, the worst things, especially for response and other things. But I don't know. I mean, we can look at whatever.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'd like to ask Mr. Clifford to look into fuel tanker trucks on Bergen Road now. They have moved from Walnut Lane over to Bergen. And there's, as serpentine as that road is, it's pretty dangerous with one of those trucks on your rear. If you look into that, please.
I can do.
All right. Anything else on your end?
No, Mr. Mayor, I think that's it for the city staff this evening.
Any other comments from council? Right, we stand adjourned. What?